Welcome back, guys. So today is the review of Napoleon. Now, this might come as a surprise to some of you, but like Austerlitz, it was a masterpiece. But unlike Austerlitz, it was a masterpiece in how to disappoint your audience. Because that's what I left. Actually, no, not even left. Halfway through, quarter of the way through, I was disappointed, and I was just in my seat squirming at how annoying this film was. It was a nightmare. So anyway, today what I'm going to do is give out my thoughts and hopefully save you a bit of time. So I think, like many of us, the thought of the new movie was exciting. I know I was excited when it first came to light that he was making one. Ridley Scott has done some amazing films like Gladiator. I mean, I really love the opening battle scene in Gladiator. I think that's really cool. Yes, they kind of lose their cohesion and end up just sort of one-on-one men just fighting, which didn't really happen, but still, it was a good opening battle scene, and it was a good film overall, one of my favourites. You also have, despite its historical misrepresentations, which I won't get into today, I could do another video on that, Kingdom of Heaven, which, again, was quite good, and it did show large-scale battles and lots of troops moving. So with the thought of those two movies in my mind, I was quite excited to see what he could do with Napoleon. And what can I say other than I was amazed at what he achieved. In 3 hours, he reduced one of the most charismatic, interesting statesmen and military leaders of history into a snivelling loser simp. Simple as that. I'm honestly very, very annoyed by this hatchet job. It didn't have really anything good going for it. I mean, it misrepresents Napoleon. It ignores his marshals and all of their personalities. I mean, they were big characters too. I mean, there's no two ways around it. I mean, the sort of things that they got up to, you could make films on each of them. But no, they're completely ignored, or at least for the most part. It ignores most of his opponents. The reasons for the wars and coalitions. The historical accuracy of the film is missing at almost every stage. There's a few areas where there's a little bit of it, but mostly it's just absolutely ridiculous. And I think the only things that were mostly accurate, even though again there were a few issues, were the uniforms. And you think this film had $200 million as its budget, and they could barely get anything right. I mean, it baffles me. Now, with that tirade out of the way, I'll go through the film fully. So if you haven't seen the film yet, don't bother. Just watch this review and save yourself $20 of a ticket and 3 hours of your life. But spoilers are ahead, so if you do want to see the film, stop now. And now I'm going to break the movie down into about 3 parts. The first is going to be from opening scene, which is the execution, all the way through to him meeting Josephine. Part 2 will be Egypt to Austerlitz, and then the final part will be from the other side of Austerlitz all the way through to his death. And I'll also try and give a grade to each of the battles throughout the film. So, part 1, the execution scene of Marie Antoinette is okay. Historically, it is in the wrong location, but that's not too much of an issue for me. What is, Napoleon wasn't there. He wasn't present for it. But yeah, there he is in the crowd. Now, I feel we missed a real opportunity at this point to show his early years on Corsica and his father getting him a King's scholarship so he could study in France and train to become an artillery officer. I mean, that little fact is something that's quite important in his career. But all of that interesting part of his life just ignored, like it didn't even happen. No, Napoleon's just there. Then we get Napoleon getting sent to Toulon. No real explanation as to why he's being chosen. No explanation for the audience as to why the city is being held by the British. Because in the film, you just get the idea that it's literally just a British occupation. In reality, there were British, Spanish, and Royalist French, all in about equal numbers, about a third, holding the city because they were all supporting the French monarchy, revolution, revolutionaries were against the monarchy, so yeah, that's why we were there. But you don't get any of that. It's just British swearing, being rude to the locals, taking this town, and Napoleon has to go down and see them off. We don't get any indication that whole chunks of France were still loyal to the crown. I mean, the revolution is just implied to have taken place, and the whole of France now be revolutionary, apart from this location where the British are. There were huge chunks, especially out in the countryside, the Catholic regions as well, which were not for the revolution. They were fully behind the king, behind the royal family. So that's completely glossed over. So next we see Napoleon arrive, and he sees a weary, beaten down army after a few minutes. He has a plan. He also dons some dirty vagabond clothes and decides to do a personal reconnaissance of the city. This will be a reoccurring theme of him going right up close and personal. Then we get to the siege. Now, in my opinion, the siege is probably the best battle in the entire film. I mean, historical accuracy still leaves a little bit to be desired, but it's not too bad overall. I mean, we get that Napoleon's horse was killed from under him. We get that he's scaling the wall of the fortress. The fortress is taken. Some of the ships are burnt. Well, maybe actually from the film, most of the ships in the harbour are actually getting destroyed. So we get most of the points. Uniforms are pretty reasonable. So overall, I've given the battle, the siege, a 7 out of 10. However, the film shows the British fleet pretty well being destroyed, whilst it was actually the French fleet that was burned, and most of the Royal Navy got away. Napoleon was only a junior officer at the time, whilst the film makes out to be him basically doing everything. He was just a junior officer. But we are led to believe that he single-handedly did the whole thing. So, okay, fair enough. It's a film about Napoleon. Let's build him up a bit. But they could have put extra pieces in my opinion. Next, we have him travel back to Paris, and it's quite a bizarre scene, but we have him meeting Josephine for the first time. And it's really at this point that any character development for Napoleon ends. And he now just becomes very childish around her, and he's very childish in his dealings with other heads of state and ambassadors. Now we get into part 2. As far as I'm concerned, the best parts of the film are now behind us, and we start our inexorable spiral down into destruction. So we now skip over the first Italian campaign in its entirety. I mean, that campaign was pretty important for him because he gains renown. But no, we're just going to forget all about that. We're just going to sail straight out to Egypt. So we don't have anything regarding Napoleon's pursuit. Sorry, not his pursuit. Nelson's pursuit of Napoleon's fleet across the Mediterranean. The fact that Nelson's fleet overtook him in a fog storm, and that's why they didn't catch up with them, because they actually overtook them. That's completely ignored. Nope. We don't get anything about the landing, really. We don't get anything about the taking of Alexandria. We jump pretty well straight to the foot of the pyramids, and we have the Battle of the Pyramids. We don't get any divisional squares. I mean, what I was talking about in my previous video was it would be awesome to have an overview shot looking down on divisional squares and the Mamelukes charging. No, we don't get any of that. We don't get any squares. We don't get any Mamelukes charging. All we get is Napoleon gives the order for his artillery pieces to fire at the pyramids, and the enemy leader falls from his horse, and the battle is over. That is it. Nothing. So I gave that a 1 out of 10. It was absolute trash. I mean, the battle was fought, I think it was approximately 19 kilometres away, on the other side of the Nile. No cannon fired on the pyramid. I mean, it's pathetic. It is absolutely pathetic. Then we have Napoleon having a look at some artefacts and one of the pharaoh's sarcophagus. And that's pretty well it for Egypt. He then gets told by someone who we don't actually find out who he is, a general of some description, that Napoleon's wife is having an affair. And so he runs home. That's it. basically. What actually happened is he slept with one of his general's wives, and he only returned to France due to the political instability that was happening at the time and the military defeats that were happening all across Europe, basically. That's why he went back, because he could see an opportunity to expand his power. But no, this film, it's only because of Josephine. We also completely ignore his march into the Middle East, because he was going after the Ottomans. No, that's completely ignored also. So then we have, back in France, Napoleon cries over Josephine and admits that he's nothing without her. And that's pretty well that. He's then mostly retired as far as the film goes, until he's asked to help overthrow the government, which he reluctantly agrees to do. I mean, yeah, he's a poor person who's thrust back into it. He didn't want anything to do with it, if you believe what the film is saying. Next, we kind of jump forwards a little bit, and now Napoleon is made first consul. Well, actually, before that, we do get the coup scene, which is actually pretty good. Pretty historically accurate. With the grenadiers in the courtyard, Napoleon's brother holding the sword up to him and saying that if he betrays France, he's going to kill him. Historically good. So that is a very good scene. I'm not going to grade it because it's not a battle, but that's a good piece. Next, we have Napoleon is made first consul, and he's now meeting with ambassadors. And when he meets with the British, he makes the stupid line, "You think you're so good because you have boats." Oh, what fantastic comedy. It's just so childish and pathetic. And then he storms out of the room like a petulant child. I mean, we know that Napoleon was a great showman, and that there were times when he would put on a show and he would shout and scream to make a point. But this doesn't give that impression at all. You just see him as just being basically a baby, a little child who can't get his own way, and he's just throwing his toys out of the pram. Yeah, it's just pathetic. It's loserish is probably the best way to say it. In due course, he is crowned emperor. It's an okay scene, which gets most of it right, but we don't get told that the Pope is there, or that the Pope almost didn't agree at the last minute to do the crowning, because he found out that Napoleon's marriage was only a civil ceremony, not a religious one. So they had to do a religious marriage at the last moment just to be able to get that sorted. Because of the fact that the film was so quick to gloss over the whole of the Italian campaigns, we miss all of his dealings with the Pope and the Italians and all of the things that he had to do to get them back on side, which is actually very interesting in and of itself. But we skip that entirely. We've skipped Marengo and all of those campaigns. We get Napoleon crowning himself, which, cool, that's what happened. And that's that. The next thing we know, again, we've jumped forwards a few more years and we go straight to Austerlitz, which was, well, thought of by most people as Napoleon's greatest battle. So I had quite a lot of hope for this piece. I was really excited and thinking this is going to be a good battle. But the battle scene is absolutely atrocious. I mean, we have Napoleon donning his disguises again to reconnoitre the enemy positions. We have his artillery and infantry dug into trenches and then covering those trenches with white sheets so that they're concealed. And then we have the entire battle fought on the lakes. No Pratzen Heights, no forced flanking march from Davout, no tactical genius, just a massed rabble of Russians and Austrians charging a French camp. Now, I don't know why it's a French camp and not a village, but no, they just charge this French camp, which has a few French soldiers in it. There's a little bit of a melee. Then some French cavalry charge down, which immediately puts the whole Russian and Austrian army to flight across the field, the frozen lakes, and then they pull back the white blankets, and then the artillery open fire on the lakes and basically destroy the entire Russian and Austrian armies. It is absolute garbage. I mean, absolute garbage. The only things good are the uniforms. But I have to give it a 3 out of 10, and I think that's being generous, to be honest. I mean, it was depressing how little respect they showed for the battle or any of the characters or anything. It's just, I don't know, probably 5 minutes and the whole battle was done. Oh, it was disgrace. Absolutely disgraceful. Then we move to part 3 of my review, and we jump to Tilsit, between Napoleon and Alexander. We ignore the whole war that has been raging, not to mention the destruction of the Prussian army or the occupation of Berlin. They joke and say how terrible the British are, and that's about it. They have little talk about taking over the Middle East, but it's kind of a side note. We don't get any information about the Prussian king. He's just ignored. Then we fly all the way back to Paris, where we have an uncomfortable divorce scene from Josephine. And then he meets his new Austrian wife, and for about 30 seconds you see her, and then that's the end of that. There's no development of characters yet again. And then for some reason, we ignore everything in between. We ignore what's going on in Spain, and we just jump straight to 1812 and the Russian invasion. We completely skip Spain, which I don't know why, because that's quite an important place. It's kind of got some of the underlying reasons as to why the Russians and other nations started to feel they could stand up to Napoleon. But that's completely ignored. We're not given any detailed explanation as to why and what has led up to the invasion of Russia or Spain. It is because it is. That's it. And throughout the entire film, Spain isn't mentioned. So, yeah, if you're hoping for anything of the Peninsular War or anything like that, well, good luck. The invasion doesn't show any planning or building up supplies, just a column, marching and getting ambushed several times by Cossacks. We get our first glimpse of the man we believe to be Ney, but he gets no development. He might as well just be a minor extra. I mean, you see him, I don't think he says a word, and then that's the end of it. He's just got red hair, so that's why you assume it's Ney. And then we get to Borodino. Again, a massive battle. A very, very important battle. And what can I say? 20 seconds? Maybe 30 for the whole thing? That's it? That's all we get for Borodino. Now what do we get? We get Napoleon leading a cavalry charge, and then the battle is won. 1 out of 10. I would say probably 0 out of 10, to be honest, because the one thing they show, which is a cavalry charge, and Napoleon's leading it, which means that that's completely inaccurate. So, yeah, a 1 out of 10 is very generous. It ignores almost everything. The redoubts, the great cavalry charges. This battle representation is a disaster. I mean, I had to re-watch War and Peace, and that allowed me to regain a bit of my sanity. I mean, that's a very long film. I think it's about 6 hours. So I actually skipped just to the Battle of Austerlitz and then the Battle of Borodino. They are very good to watch. Maybe, again, they're not 100% accurate, but they are 100 times more impressive than this garbage. And when I say 100 times, I mean they're still good. It's definitely worth a watch. But, oh, my goodness, disappointing. Very disappointing. I mean, again, we haven't developed any of the characters, so we don't see Murat leading his cavalry charges, and then the fact that when they got countercharged, he had to take shelter in the French squares. We don't see the storming of any of the redoubts. We don't get anything. It's just bland boringness. Gosh, 200 million. Anyway, then we quickly jump to an abandoned Moscow. Yeah, that's it. There's a few homeless people, a few dogs running around, but that's it. It's bland, it's dark, it's dull, no grandeur. And then the city starts to burn, and that's it. The army leaves Russia, no more battles shown, nothing other than a few scenes of men eating horses, and a few frozen men on the floor. I mean, he goes into Russia with, 500,000 men, comes out with, I think it was less than 10,000 men, but you don't really get any indication of this. It just glosses over it all. It's really bad. Really bad. We miss all of the interesting parts of the period. I mean, his army was destroyed, so he raced back to France in history. Within 3 months, he'd built up a new army of 200,000. I mean, his army was gone, and everyone was now coming against him, so he needed his army. Also, the army was destroyed, and in France, there was most likely going to be a coup of some description, so he had to race back to France to stop any of that from happening. So that's why he went back to France and built up his new army, and then went back on the offensive in early 1814. But that is just completely ignored. I mean, again, it kind of goes back to the point where they don't want to show him being decent in any ability. He's not charismatic, he's not a leader, he's not an organizer, he can't do anything, and so they don't want to show him doing any of those things. We skip the Battle of Leipzig, the Battle of the Nations. Again, a monstrous battle, but we completely ignore it. We skip all of the subsequent retreats to France. We don't hear about his amazing campaigns of 1813 or early 1814. No, we just have him abdicate and get exiled, and that's it. Then when he's in exile, he lays around, stares at a boat for a little bit, and then decides, I'm just going to go back to France. They copy the scene from the start of Waterloo where Ney's sent to capture him. And although this did occur, so it's not like they've made it up, this movie, you've got about 50 men, maybe 100 men, both sides, Napoleon's and Ney's. It's pathetic. You think, okay, so he's got 100 men that he's come back with, not his 1,000, and Ney's been sent with 100 men to arrest him. It's just ridiculous. I mean, the Battle of Waterloo movie, definitely need to watch that. I mean, that's several thousands on Ney's side. That is impressive. That's worth a watch, even though the battle doesn't actually take place. But it's inspiring when they all run back over. Vive l'ampleur. This is just, pathetic. That's going to be my word for this film. Then we have him making a beeline to see Josephine, and then he's so distraught because she's died before he could arrive. I mean, in reality, he had already been made aware that she was dead. I think he actually realised she died whilst he was still on Elba. I'm not 100% sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he knew at that stage, and I'm pretty sure he didn't go to her country estate. He went straight to Paris. Next, we see a couple of seconds of planning the 100 Days campaign. Literally, there's just a map on the floor with a few flags showing where the different enemy armies are, and him making a line to split between the British and the Prussians. And then we skip the Battle of Ligny, skip the Battle of Quatre Bras, and go straight to Waterloo. Now, this is the longest battle in the film, but unfortunately it's no less disappointing or disastrous. I mean, just to give you an idea of how ridiculous it is, we have a 95th Rifleman, let's just call him Richard Sharp, shall we, with a telescopic sight, wanting to try a shot at Napoleon, who is within range. Napoleon in the film is stood in his doorway to his tent, so probably about a mile away. And then we have the quote from Wellington saying that commanders of armies have better things to do than fire at each other. So again, they've just stolen that line from Waterloo and buggered it up, basically. That's the only way you can describe it. It's just ridiculous. Then we go a little bit more, and we have the British digging trenches and have the whole army equipped with tents. And the tents don't get taken down prior to the battle. No, there's just a big tent encampment at the back of Wellington's line. All the artillery pieces on both sides are dug in with gabion baskets around them. We have no Hougoumont, we have no La Haye Sainte. I mean, all of the key features that make Waterloo, they've just gone. I mean, it's ridiculous. So next we have the first French advance, which we presume to be Durdon's Corps. But again, we've had no character development, no planning, nothing. So we don't know what's going on, just Ney waves his hat and off they go. Yeah, go figure. Next, we have a cavalry charge where this is a French cavalry charge where the British come forwards onto the front slope of the hill, and that's where they form square. Not on the reverse, but on the front, so they're in complete line of sight, of the French artillery. We get a couple of hundred, if that, French cavalrymen, not the sort of 10,000 that actually went forwards with Ney. I know, it's just one thing after another, this film. Then after that, we get a second attack, which is presumably supposed to be the Old Guard. And again, now we have Napoleon leading a cavalry charge. As his Old Guard's going forwards, he's leading a cavalry charge. Yeah, the British are already on the front slope of the hill, and all order and cohesion is lost completely, and we end up just with a big scrum of both armies just ploughing into each other. And then we see them. The Prussians arrive. But where do they arrive? They arrive on Wellington's right wing. I mean, what on earth is that? I mean, you heard that right. On his right. How did they get that wrong? Whether you've watched the film, The Battle of Waterloo, whether you've read a book, whether you've done any research whatsoever, you know that they arrived on Wellington's left, which was Napoleon's right. But we don't get anything to do with Plassinois. We don't get anything whatsoever. All we do is all of a sudden get a mass of Prussians arriving on Wellington's right, basically running through where Hougoumont would be. But, yeah, for reasons unbeknownst to us, they arrive, and the battle is basically lost for Napoleon. The next scene is pretty well Napoleon sat on a Royal Navy ship eating breakfast, regaling some group of young boys with stories, and that's when Wellington drops by to have a chat. The two never met in person. So, why? Because of reasons, I guess. Napoleon gets told at this point that he's going to St. Helena, and that's where he's going to be exiled. He's not coming to Britain. We have a few moments of him on the island, and then he dies. We then get a few lists of casualties from his battles, which are not even accurate. I mean, I give the movie a 2 out of 10 overall, and I think that's being generous. Possibly I should take that down to a 1 out of 10, but let's just go 2 out of 10 overall. And I rated a major defeat, worse than the Prussians' defeat at Jena Auerstedt. I mean, it's a garbage fire. Anyway, well, there you go, guys. And I'm sorry I could not be kinder, but I have to be honest, and it was just ridiculous. So go and watch the Battle of Waterloo and the Austerlitz and Borodino scenes from War and Peace, as this will allow you to have a little bit of sanity and a little bit of historical accuracy and a little bit of enjoyment. Do not watch this film. This is, yeah, just don't watch it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please leave some comments down below, because I would be interested to hear what you have to say if you've seen the film or if you haven't seen the film. And until next time, take care.